I sacrificed $50,000, my entire nest egg, for my daughter Chloe's perfect wedding. The problem? I wasn't invited. When she called a month later, not to apologize, but to demand I pay her mortgage, the answer I gave her ignited a firestorm. She was about to learn that a father's love isn't a blank check. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. It all started on a quiet Tuesday evening in May. The rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall was the only sound in my small Maple Creek house, a peaceful rhythm I'd grown accustomed to since Eleanor passed. Then, the silence was shattered by the slam of a car door, as loud as a gunshot in the Ohio twilight. Moments later, frantic footsteps hammered against my wooden porch steps. I opened the door to find my daughter Chloe, looking like a storm had hit her. At 35, she was usually the picture of put-together professionalism, but not tonight. Mascara ran in black rivers down her cheeks, and she clutched a stack of glossy wedding magazines to her chest like a shield. "Daddy, I need you to save my wedding. No, hello. No explanation for driving all the way from Columbus without calling. Just pure, uncut desperation wrapped in a designer coat that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget." "Chloe, honey, what's wrong?" I asked, guiding her inside. "Slow down." My old leather armchair groaned as I sank into it, the springs sighing with a familiar weariness I felt deep in my own bones. Chloe didn't sit. She paced between the couch and the window, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. "The venue," she finally choked out, her voice cracking. "They want $50,000 by Friday, or we lose everything. Everything, Daddy. 50,000. The number landed in the quiet room like a physical blow. It was everything. Every penny I had painstakingly saved over 15 years of careful living, a safety net I'd built for my old age. "Chloe, that's all I have," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I know." She finally collapsed into the chair across from me, the magazines spilling across the floor in a cascade of white dresses and floral arrangements. "I never wanted to ask you for this. But Daddy, this is my one day. The one day that has to be perfect." Her voice broke on the last word, and in that moment, she wasn't a grown woman anymore. She was my 8-year-old girl again, standing in this very living room after skinning her knee, looking at me with absolute faith that I could fix anything in the world. My arthritic hands trembled as she picked up a brochure from the floor and pushed it toward me. "The Grandview Estate," she whispered. "It's perfect, Daddy. Just look at it." Oh, my worn fingers, stiff with arthritis, traced the gold-embossed letters on the cover. The photographs inside were from another world. Soaring ceilings, gardens that belonged in fairy tales, and ballrooms where crystal chandeliers dripped light onto polished marble floors. It was the kind of place where dreams came true, and I knew instantly that my dreams could never afford to pay the rent there. "Doug and I went there last month," Chloe whispered, her voice filled with a reverence that sounded genuine. "I could just picture it, Daddy. Walking down that long aisle in Mama's dress, seeing you smile at me from the front row. Eleanor." The mention of her name was a well-aimed blow to my heart. Her voice echoed in my memory, as clear as if she were standing right beside me. "Never let our baby girl down, Walter, whatever she needs." It was a promise I had whispered to her on her deathbed, a vow that had become the guiding principle of my life. "But sweetheart," I managed to say, the brochure feeling impossibly heavy in my lap, "your savings, it'll all be gone." Chloe's tears came harder now, the kind that made her small shoulders shake. The marketing contracts dried up, and Kevin's been between jobs for 3 months. We've been living on credit cards, just hoping something would break our way. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine, and I saw the desperate strategist behind the heartbroken daughter. "You said you'd always be there for me," she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, a tone designed for maximum impact. "When Mama died, you promised nothing would change between us. Daddy." She only ever called me Daddy when she needed something monumental, and we both knew it. The childhood nickname fell from her lips like a practiced prayer, designed to crack open whatever vault of resistance I had left. I looked at the photos of the fairy tale venue again. Then I looked at my daughter's desperate face, at the designer purse that cost more than my monthly food budget, and at the fragile hope flickering behind her calculated tears. The air conditioner clicked off, plunging the room into a sudden, heavy silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to be counting down the seconds to my surrender. "When is the wedding?" I asked, my voice sounding distant, as if it belonged to another man. Her head snapped up, a flicker of victory in her eyes. "June 28th. 6 weeks. Just enough time to make it perfect if we can secure the venue." 6 weeks. I did the math quickly. My social security, my small pension, the little interest from Eleanor's life insurance. I could make it work, somehow. I always made it work. My shoulders slumped as the weight of the decision settled over me, a physical burden that seemed to age me another 10 years. "Okay," I said, the word tasting like ash. "Okay, I'll get the money." The words had barely left my mouth before Chloe launched herself from her chair, nearly knocking over the coffee table in her rush to reach me. Her arms wrapped around my neck, and for a fleeting moment she smelled like the little girl who used to fall asleep on my lap during Sunday movies. "I love you so much, Daddy," she mumbled into my shoulder. "You're saving my entire life." Just as quickly as they'd started, her tears stopped. She pulled back, kissed my forehead with a newfound energy, and began gathering her scattered magazines. The desperate, heartbroken daughter from 10 minutes ago had vanished, replaced by an efficient, focused woman on a mission. "I'll come by tomorrow morning for the money," she called over her shoulder, already halfway to the door. "Early, around 9:30. I need to get to the venue by 11 to finalize everything." The door closed behind her, leaving me alone in the sudden silence. Outside, her Honda started up and pulled away, taking with it the last of my savings and, somehow, the last of my peace. I didn't sleep that night. I spent most of it at my kitchen table, surrounded by bank statements, a calculator, and 3 cups of coffee that had long gone cold. I ran the numbers again and again, as if a different calculation might change the stark reality. My emergency fund, the one I'd built penny by penny, was gone. Her car pulled into the driveway at 9 sharp, 30 minutes early. Through the window, I watched her check her reflection in the rearview mirror before striding up the walkway with the confidence of someone who knew she'd already won. She breezed through the front door I'd left unlocked, finding me still in my pajamas. "Ready for the big day?" she chirped, as if withdrawing my life savings was a cause for celebration. The safe was behind my dresser, hidden beneath Eleanor's old jewelry box. My fingers fumbled with the combination her birthday, same as always. I had withdrawn the cash the previous afternoon from 3 different banks, not wanting to explain to any single teller why a man my age suddenly needed his entire nest egg in cash. Back in the kitchen, I counted out the crisp $100 bills onto the table. Chloe watched with barely concealed excitement, her foot tapping against the linoleum while her thumbs flew across her phone screen. I tried asking a few questions. "What church are you using? How many guests?" "Oh, Daddy, so many details," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand, her eyes never leaving the growing stacks of money. "The venue handles most of that." "There," I said, sliding the thick envelope across the table. 50,000, every cent." She snatched it with both hands, clutching it like she was afraid I might change my mind. The hug she gave me was rushed, distracted. Over her shoulder, through the kitchen window, I caught a glimpse of her car's back seat. It was packed with overnight bags and suitcases. "Are you going somewhere after the venue meeting?" I asked, pulling away. She seemed startled. "What?" "Oh, those," she laughed, a little too quickly. "Kevin and I are thinking about a weekend trip before the wedding gets crazy. You know, a last chance to relax." She kissed my cheek, the envelope now secure in her purse, and headed for the door with the same urgency that had brought her here last night. "I'll call you later with updates," she called from the driveway, and then she was gone. I stood on the porch, watching her taillights disappear down the road, feeling both proud and strangely hollow, like I'd just given away something far more valuable than money. For 3 days I waited. I kept my phone by my side, expecting it to ring with an excited update from Chloe. I imagined her telling me the venue was secured, the contracts were signed, her dream was coming true. I made excuses for the silence. She must be incredibly busy, I told myself, picturing her running around Columbus, coordinating with florists and caterers. The hollow feeling from the day she left slowly began to recede, replaced by a familiar paternal pride. A week passed. The pride had faded, and the hollow feeling returned, sharper this time. I finally decided to call her. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up, her voice breathless and rushed. "Daddy." "Hi. Is everything okay?" "I'm fine, honey. Just calling to check in. How did it go with the venue?" There was a pause, filled with the sound of traffic on her end. "Oh, it's a lot," she said vaguely. "So much stress with the caterer right now, they're trying to change our menu at the last minute. Can I call you back? I'm just walking into a meeting." She hung up before I could say another word. She never called back. I waited another 4 days before trying again. This time the excuse was different. "The venue is having some issues with our date, and Kevin's work schedule is a mess." The time after that, it was drama on Kevin's side of the family. Each conversation was shorter than the last, a quick, hurried explanation followed by a click as the line went dead. To keep my thoughts from spiraling, I started a log in a small spiral notebook I kept by the phone. I wrote down the date of each call and the excuse she gave. It was a methodical calming act, but as the weeks crawled by, the pages began to fill up. The list of excuses grew longer, more elaborate, and less believable. The memory of the packed suitcases in her car, a detail I had tried to dismiss, kept returning with a new and ominous weight. By the first week of June, my notebook had 5 entries, and the worry in my gut had twisted into a tight knot of suspicion. The wedding was supposedly just a few weeks away, yet I knew nothing. No church name, no ceremony time, not even a rough guest count. I decided to try a different approach. On my next call, I wouldn't ask for information. I would offer help. "Honey," I said when she finally answered. "I was thinking, do you need help with anything else? The music, the flowers? I could drive up for a day and lend a hand." The silence on the other end was different this time. It wasn't rushed. It was cold. "Everything's handled, Daddy," she said, her voice flat and distant. "You've done enough." The line went dead. I stood in my quiet kitchen, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, the 4 final words echoing in my mind. "You've done enough." It wasn't a thank you. It was a dismissal. A door being firmly, and finally, shut in my face. I stood there for a long time, the dead phone pressed to my ear. The silence that followed her words was worse than the weeks of excuses. The excuses had been flimsy, insulting even, but they were something. This was nothing. It was a void. Her dismissal hadn't just been rushed. It had been cold, deliberate. "You've done enough." The message was clear. My role in this chapter of her life, the role I had paid $50,000 to play, was over. The knot of suspicion in my stomach tightened into a cold, hard certainty. Something was wrong. Not wedding stress wrong. Something fundamentally, terribly wrong. June came and went. The 28th, the date she'd given me, passed without a phone call, a text message, or an invitation. Just another quiet Friday in Maple Creek. July settled over Ohio like a suffocating blanket, the air thick and still. I spent most evenings on my back porch watching the fireflies dance in the growing dusk, my sweet tea sweating in the humidity. The old rope swing I'd built for Chloe when she was 7 hung motionless from the oak tree, a silent testament to a past that felt more distant than ever. It was on one of those evenings that George, my neighbor from across the street, found me. He ambled over with a beer in his hand, his weathered face creased with genuine concern. We'd known each other for 40 years. He'd seen Chloe grow up. "Wedding stress finally getting to you, Walter?" he asked, leaning against the porch railing. I had told him about Chloe's big day back in May, my voice swelling with a pride that now felt foolish. I tried to force a smile. "You know how at Island brides get busy. Haven't heard from her in a couple of weeks." The words sounded hollow, even to my own ears. George took a long swallow of his beer, his eyes never leaving my face. He was a straightforward man, not one for beating around the bush. "That don't sound right, Walter," he said, his voice a low grumble. "Brides get busy, sure, but they don't ice out their own father. Not the one who raised them." He paused, letting the words hang in the hot summer air between us. "You know," he continued, "my Sarah was a mess before our wedding. Called her mother 3 times a day. A daughter needs her family at a time like this." I stared out into the yard, at the ghosts of a little girl laughing on a swing. What kind of father sits by while his daughter builds a new life without him? What kind of man lets his life savings disappear into a black hole of silence? Maybe you should just drive up there, George said finally, his voice gentle but firm. Check on her. The worst thing in this world, Walter, is not knowing. His words struck me with the force of a revelation. He was right. The doubt, the worry, the sleepless nights, they were all worse than any truth could be. The suggestion hung between us, dangerous and inevitable. It was no longer a frantic, worried thought in the back of my mind. It was a plan. The decision, once made, settled in my bones. 4 days of wrestling with indecision ended on Saturday morning when I pulled my truck keys from the hook by the door. It was July 19th, 9 o'clock sharp, with the sun already promising another scorcher, and my resolve finally crystallized into action. I showered carefully and chose clean jeans and my best button-down shirt. The blue one, Eleanor always said, brought out my eyes. This wasn't a casual visit. This was a mission. Chloe's address was written in my careful script on a scrap of paper tucked inside my wallet, numbers I'd memorized but never intended to use for a surprise visit. The drive east on Highway 70 cut through familiar Ohio farm country, past fields of corn that stretched to the horizon and billboards advertising things I'd never heard of. I stopped for gas and a coffee that tasted like burnt wire, but I needed the caffeine more than the flavor. My hands shook slightly as I counted out the change, and I told myself it was just age, not nerves. With every mile that passed, I rehearsed conversations in my head. In one version, Chloe opened the door, her face breaking into a relieved smile. She would have a perfectly reasonable explanation for her silence, a lost phone, a family emergency on Kevin's side, and we would laugh together about my overprotective worrying. I would spend the afternoon helping with some last-minute wedding task, my heart swelling with pride. But another, darker version of the story kept intruding, one where the silence meant exactly what I feared it did. As I neared the sprawling suburbs of Columbus, the open farmland gave way to a maze of identical-looking subdivisions. The radio, which had been playing some George Strait song about unbreakable family bonds, now felt like a cosmic mockery. I saw a billboard promoting intimate wedding packages, starting at $5,000. The number seemed to mock me, making the $50,000 I'd given her feel like an absurd, impossible sum for what she claimed she wanted. The GPS voice, calm and impersonal, guided me through streets named Maple Ridge and Oakwood until I finally reached her building. I pulled into a visitor spot and my eyes immediately found her blue Honda parked in its designated space. Number 217. She was home. The realization hit me with the force of a punch to the gut. She was home. Probably just 20 yards away, screening my calls, deciding her own father wasn't worth the interruption. I turned off the engine, and the truck fell into a sudden, deafening silence. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm against the quiet of the parking lot. I wasn't rushing toward joy, like I had on this same highway when Eleanor was in labor with Chloe. This time, I was rushing toward an answer I was terrified to hear. I sat there for a long moment, the dashboard clock ticking past 10:15. My reflection in the rearview mirror showed a tired old man, with worry lines etched deeper than they had been 2 months ago. Taking a steadying breath, I straightened my shirt, checked that my wallet was secure, and opened the door. The July heat hit me like the blast from an open oven. 20 steps across the baking asphalt to the building's entrance. 2 flights of stairs, my footsteps echoing in the unnervingly quiet stairwell. The hallway on her floor smelled generic, like carpet cleaner and other people's cooking, a world away from the familiar scent of wood polish and old books in my own home. Apartment 2B sat at the very end of the hall. For a second, my courage wavered. I could still turn back, drive home, and pretend this never happened. But the thought of the sleepless nights, of the gnawing uncertainty, pushed me forward. I raised my hand and knocked, twice, the sound sharp and final in the corridor. I waited. I could hear the faint murmur of a television morning show behind the thin walls, the steady hum of an air conditioning unit. Footsteps approached the door, then paused. The peephole went dark as Chloe checked to see who was visiting unannounced on a Saturday morning. An agonizingly long moment passed, a silence so heavy I could feel it pressing in on me. Then, I heard the metallic turn of a deadbolt. The door opened, but only a few inches, just wide enough for me to see her face. She was still in pajama pants and an oversized t-shirt, her hair uncombed. Her expression caught somewhere between utter shock and a flash of what looked suspiciously like panic. "Daddy?" she breathed, her voice a reedy whisper. "What are you doing here?" I kept my own voice level, fighting to keep the tremor out of it. "You haven't been answering my calls, Chloe." I was worried. "Oh, I... I've been so busy with..." She gestured vaguely behind her into the dim apartment, her sentence trailing off as if she couldn't conjure a believable lie quickly enough. She seemed to remember her manners, though the hospitality felt forced. "Come in, I guess," she said, opening the door wider. "But I can't visit for long. Kevin and I have plans this afternoon." It was a weak attempt to control a situation that had already spiraled far beyond her grasp. I stepped across the threshold, and the door clicked shut behind me, sealing us both inside with a truth that was about to come out. The apartment was smaller than I'd imagined from her descriptions. It was decorated with expensive-looking furniture that seemed designed more for a magazine photo than for actual living. It felt cold, despite the air conditioner working overtime against the July heat. My eyes landed immediately on the kitchen counter. Dozens of them. Wedding cards, in shades of cream and gold, were scattered in a messy pile, some still sealed. A paper landscape of congratulations I hadn't been invited to share. "Nice place," I said, my voice sounding rough. "Very modern." Chloe moved nervously between the small living room and the kitchen, straightening throw pillows that didn't need straightening, moving a stack of magazines from one table to another. She was trying to appear busy, but it was the frantic energy of a cornered animal. My gaze drifted to the coffee table. Several silver picture frames lay face down, as if they'd been hastily hidden just before I arrived. I decided I had seen enough. The time for polite questions was over. I kept my voice gentle, the same paternal tone I'd used 1,000 times, but I infused it with a steeliness I hadn't known I possessed. "Honey, I need to know about the wedding." She froze with her back to me, her hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter so tightly her knuckles went white. "I've been patient for 2 months while you've avoided every conversation," I continued, taking a step closer. "I just need to know, when exactly is the ceremony?" She didn't turn around. Her shoulders were tense. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and fragile, a child's voice. "Why? Why do you need to know?" The question, so transparently defensive, broke through the last of my restraint. The gentleness in my voice evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard weight of the truth. "Because I'm your father, Chloe," I said, each word deliberate and heavy. "Because I gave you $50,000 to make your dream wedding happen. And because for 8 weeks you've treated me like a stranger." My words hung in the air between us, heavy and unbreakable. Chloe seemed to shrink under their weight. Her shoulders slumped, and the defiant panic in her eyes dissolved into something else. Pure, unadulterated guilt. She turned slowly to face me, and I saw that these tears were real. Not the strategic, well-timed tears from my living room 2 months ago, but the devastating, ragged tears of someone whose lies had finally run out. "The wedding," she stammered, her voice so quiet I had to strain to hear it. "Daddy, the wedding, it was 4 days ago." The words didn't register at first. They were just sounds, nonsensical syllables that my brain refused to assemble into meaning. Then they landed. Not like a punch, but like a slow, crushing weight. I physically stumbled backward, my hand reaching out to find the doorframe for support as the room tilted around me. "That's not funny, Chloe," I rasped, my throat suddenly dry. It wasn't supposed to be funny. Her voice got smaller with each word. It was just immediate family. A very small ceremony at Kevin's parents' church. We decided we just wanted something intimate. Immediate family. The phrase echoed in the cavernous, empty space that had just opened up in my chest. Immediate family. The man who had held her hand as she took her first steps, who had taught her to ride a bike, who had sat by her bedside through fevers and heartbreaks, who had sacrificed his entire life savings for her happiness. That man was apparently not considered immediate family. I stared at the stranger wearing my daughter's face, my heart splintering into 1,000 tiny pieces. A cold calm washed over me, the kind that follows a devastating shock. My voice, when I finally found it, was steady and devoid of all emotion. And where exactly did my $50,000 go, if not toward this perfect, Intimate wedding. Chloe's face crumpled. She couldn't meet my eyes, staring instead at a spot on the floor as if it held the answer to a question she never wanted to be asked. We needed it, she mumbled, the words choked with shame. For other things. The deposit on this apartment, Kevin's car payment, some credit card debt. She finally looked up, her eyes pleading. The wedding only cost $3,000. $3,000. The number hung in the air, obscene in its smallness. I had given her a future, and she had spent it on past mistakes, all while lying to my face about crystal chandeliers and marble columns. The realization felt like drowning in shallow water. Every tear, every panicked phone call, every mention of her mother, it was all a lie. A carefully rehearsed play, and I was the unsuspecting audience of one. You played me, I said, the words coming out flat and dead. The entire thing was a performance. It wasn't personal, Daddy. Those 3 words, spoken so casually, cut deeper than any intended cruelty could have. It wasn't personal. My sacrifice, my love, my trust, none of it was personal to her. I wasn't a father to be cherished. I was a resource to be managed, an obstacle to be overcome with a few well-placed tears. She had manipulated me with surgical precision, using my love for her as a weapon against my common sense, and she couldn't even grant me the dignity of admitting it was deliberate. Incredibly, she held out her phone again, the screen still showing a frozen image of her radiant smile. We hired a photographer. It was really beautiful. Just let me show you. She still didn't get it. She thought a video could patch this. She thought she could share a counterfeit happiness with the man whose heart she had just systematically broken. I looked at her one last time, at the face of the daughter I thought I knew, and I memorized the features of the stranger standing before me. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't have any more words for her. There was nothing left to say. I gave a single, sharp shake of my head and turned toward the door. Panic flared in her eyes again as she realized I was leaving. Daddy, please, she begged, her voice rising. Please don't leave like this. We can talk about this. But I was already walking away. Her pleas echoed behind me in the anonymous hallway, but they were just noise now. I descended the metal stairs, my boots clanging with each step, the sound marking my retreat from the life I once knew. I pushed through the building's heavy glass door and stepped back out into the oppressive Ohio heat. It felt mercifully cool compared to the fire of betrayal burning in my chest. My truck sat baking in the parking lot, the chrome door handle almost too hot to touch without wincing. I fumbled with the keys for a full minute before the lock clicked open, and I slid onto a vinyl seat that scorched right through my shirt. The engine turned over reluctantly, the air conditioning blasting superheated air that only gradually began to cool as I sat motionless, staring through the windshield at nothing at all. 4 days ago. My daughter had gotten married 4 days ago, and I had spent those days worrying about a wedding that was already over. The first 10 miles of the drive home passed in complete, hollow silence. My mind was a blank slate, empty except for the road ahead and the rhythmic hum of tires on sun-softened asphalt. I was in shock, a passenger in my own body, simply going through the motions of operating the vehicle that was taking me away from the ruins of my life. Out of habit, I hit the button for the radio. Country music started playing, something about family bonds and keeping promises. I snapped it off with a violent twist of the knob. The silence felt safer than lyrics that reminded me of how thoroughly I had been played. Somewhere around the 20-mile marker, I started talking to myself, the words harsh in the truck's quiet cab. 4 days ago. The sound of my own voice made it real. She got married 4 days ago. That's when the real anger started to build. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes you want to punch a wall, but something colder, heavier, and far more dangerous. I began to replay the scene from my living room back in May, but this time, I saw it with perfect clarity. I saw the performance, the wedding magazines clutched like props in a carefully rehearsed play. Every hug calculated, every tear strategic, every "I love you, Daddy" delivered with a hidden price tag. The billboard advertising intimate wedding packages loomed up ahead. It felt like a personal insult from the universe. My day. Chloe hadn't just stolen my money. She had stolen my day. The one moment I had imagined since she was 8 years old. making me play groom for her dolls in the backyard. The memory, once so sweet, now tasted like poison, infected by the knowledge that she had been learning the art of manipulation even then. The city limit sign for Maple Creek appeared around a gentle curve, a weathered green marker for a world that no longer felt like mine. The familiar sight of home, which used to comfort me, now only reminded me of everything I had been willing to sacrifice for a daughter who saw me as a convenient ATM, not a father worth including in her life. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white against the black plastic. Through the truck's windows, heat mirages made the road ahead appear liquid and unreal, which seemed fitting, since nothing in my life felt solid anymore. I pulled into my driveway and killed the engine, sitting for a moment as it ticked and cooled. Through the windshield, my mailbox bulged with a week's worth of accumulated mail I'd been ignoring while consumed by Chloe's fictional wedding crisis. The sight of that overflowing box, a small symbol of a life neglected, made something in me straighten my shoulders. Time to stop ignoring reality and start dealing with it. The key felt unfamiliar in my fingers as I unlocked the small metal door. Paper spilled out in a cascade of white and colored envelopes. Advertisements for things I didn't need, local circulars, and official notices that demanded attention. I gathered the pile against my chest and headed inside, grateful for the familiar cool of my own home. My kitchen table became a sorting station. I worked with a numb efficiency, creating stacks, bills in one, junk mail in another, and official-looking correspondence in a third. Most of it was routine. The electric company, my insurance premium, a Medicare update. But one envelope made my blood run cold. It was from First National Bank, and it wasn't addressed to me. It was for Chloe. Across the front, a bold red stamp screamed, "Urgent payment past due!" My heart, which I thought couldn't sink any lower, dropped into my stomach. My hands trembled as I tore it open, already knowing what I'd find, but desperately hoping I was wrong. Account number 4, 78291. Payment amount, $1,200. Due date, July 15th. Days overdue, 4. July 15th. The same day she had gotten married. The same day she had deliberately excluded me from her life. The coincidence was sickening. A question began to form in the cold, angry space in my mind. Just how long had this been going on? The question propelled me from the kitchen into my home office, what used to be Eleanor's sewing room. I went directly to the old metal filing cabinet in the corner. My fingers bypassed the files for taxes and insurance, landing on one I hadn't opened in a long time. The label, in my own careful handwriting, read, "Chloe Househelp." With a deep, steadying breath, I pulled the drawer open and lifted the folder out. It felt heavier than it should. I spread the contents of the folder across my desk, and my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a collection of receipts or agreements. It was a neat stack of canceled checks. 12 of them. One for every month of the past year. Each one was made out to First National Bank for the account number on the overdue notice, and each one was for exactly $1,200. My hands moved automatically, spreading the checks across the dark wood of the desk in chronological order. August, September, October. They formed a calendar of my own exploitation. I saw Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all pass by in a parade of my own signatures. Through every holiday, every phone call where she'd told me she loved me, she had been quietly cashing my checks, never once mentioning that the help was ongoing. The memory came back to me then, not as a fond recollection, but with the sickening clarity of hindsight. Chloe and Kevin, sitting on my couch a year ago, showing me photos of a starter home they'd found. They were a young couple with promising careers, they'd said. They just needed a little help getting established. "Just for 6 months, Daddy," Chloe had promised, squeezing my hand. "Just to help us build up some savings and get our feet under us. You'd practically be investing in our future." 6 months had become 12, and 12, I now realized, was meant to become indefinite. At the bottom of the file, I found the thank you card she'd sent after that very first payment. The cheerful, loopy handwriting seemed to mock me. "You're the best daddy in the world. I'll never forget this kindness." Apparently, she'd forgotten it within a month, when the second payment became an expectation rather than a gift. I picked up a pen and started doing the math on the back of an envelope. $14,400 in mortgage payments, plus the $50,000 for the fake wedding emergency. $64,400. The number stared up at me from the paper, a monument to my own foolishness. While I had been eating store-brand groceries and wearing the same shirts I'd owned for 5 years, my daughter had been living in a house I was paying for, planning a wedding with money she'd lied to get, and treating my love like a renewable resource she could tap whenever it was convenient. I looked from the staggering total on the envelope to the red-stamped paste-due notice. She had gotten married, started a new life, and simply assumed the old man back in Maple Creek would just keep paying for her old one, automatically, forever, like some kind of parental trust fund that never required maintenance or gratitude. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of sharp clarity that sometimes follows emotional devastation. I woke before dawn, my mind clear and quiet for the first time in months. There was no more worry, no more doubt. There was only a single, unwavering purpose. The documents from last night's discovery lay organized on my kitchen table, not as evidence of my foolishness, but as a battle plan waiting for execution. I made myself a pot of strong black coffee and sat with a legal pad, jotting down notes. These were the tools of my liberation. At 8 o'clock sharp, I dialed the customer service line for First National Bank. I navigated the automated prompts with a steady hand, listening to the tinny hold music without a trace of impatience. This was not a call I was dreading. It was a call I had been waiting my whole life to learn how to make. Finally, a human voice answered, bright and professional. "This is Margaret in Mortgage Services. How can I help you today?" I took a sip of coffee, my voice calm and even when I spoke. "Good morning, Margaret. My name is Walter Collins. I have been making payments on account number 478291 for my daughter, but I'm discontinuing that arrangement immediately." There was a pause on the other end, followed by the soft clicking of a keyboard. "One moment, Mr. Collins. Let me pull up that account. Yes, I see it here, and I see you're listed as an authorized payer. Are you requesting to be removed from the account?" "Exactly," I said, a sense of finality washing over me. "I want all automatic transfers stopped, and I want my name removed as a responsible party. This arrangement is over." "I understand, sir," Margaret said. "We will need that request in writing, of course, but I can process the removal today if you can fax us a signed letter. The account holders will be notified by mail that they are now solely responsible for all future payments." Account holders, plural, Chloe and Kevin, living in their house, sleeping in their bed, building their life on my money while treating me like an afterthought. "Perfect," I said. "What is your fax number?" The call was over in less than 5 minutes. I wrote the letter, the language clear and final, and signed it with the same pen I'd used to sign 12 months' worth of their mortgage checks. Walking to the copy center in town, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, a heavy, oppressive burden I hadn't even fully realized I'd been carrying. The real consequences, for the real adults who'd been playing house with someone else's money, were about to begin. And for the first time, in a very long time, I felt free. Back home, I updated my budget for the first time in a year, without a sense of dread. Without Chloe's mortgage draining my account, I had an extra $1,200 a month. Nearly $15,000 a year that would stay where it belonged in my account, earning interest, available for my needs, not subsidizing her lifestyle. The relief was a physical thing, a tension I hadn't fully realized I'd been carrying for 12 long months, drained from my shoulders, my neck, my chest. For a year, I'd been checking my account balance with a constant low-grade anxiety, always wondering what Chloe would need next. Those days were over. With this newfound energy, I decided to do something I'd been putting off for years. I got in my truck and drove to the Maple Creek Community Woodworking Shop, a large barn-like building on the edge of town I'd often passed but never had the time or mental space to visit. The moment I stepped inside, the scent of sawdust and wood varnish filled my lungs, and it felt like coming home. The hum of a lathe and the rhythmic rasp of a hand plane were a kind of music. In the center of the shop, a cheerful, barrel-chested man with a booming laugh was working on an intricately carved rocking chair. He looked up as I entered, his eyes crinkling in a friendly smile. "First time here?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. I'm Sam. Uh, Walter, I said, shaking his offered hand. Just looking to get back into an old hobby. It's been a while. No better place for it, Sam said warmly. What are you thinking of making? I hesitated, the memory still tender. Years ago, I started a jewelry box for my wife, Eleanor. Cherrywood with dovetail joints. I never got to finish it before she passed. Sam's smile softened with understanding. He was a widower, too. I could see it in his eyes. I get that, he said quietly. My Mary passed 3 years ago. This workshop, it saved me, gave me a reason to get out of bed in the morning. He clapped a friendly hand on my shoulder. You should finish that box, Walter. But not just for Eleanor's memory. He gestured around the bustling workshop, at the men and women of all ages, all focused on their own creations. You gotta build something for yourself now, for the man you are today. His words struck a chord deep inside me. For so long my life had been defined by my role as a husband, then as a grieving widower, then as a worried father. I looked around the shop, at the tools hanging neatly on the walls, at the raw lumber stacked in the corner waiting to be shaped, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I didn't feel like my story was ending. I felt like it was just about to begin. 1 month of freedom had transformed my kitchen. August 20th found me halfway through painting the last cabinet door, country music playing softly from my old radio. My hands, once shaky with worry, were now steady with the quiet satisfaction of work done for myself, by myself. The fresh white paint covered years of old stains and memories, erasing traces of a dependency I hadn't realized were everywhere. The phone's harsh ring cut through a Garth Brooks song. I wiped my hands on a paint-stained rag and considered letting it go to voicemail. These days, most calls were either telemarketers or people I actually wanted to talk to, like George or my new friend Sam. Chloe hadn't tried to reach me since that disastrous morning a month ago. On the 4th ring, curiosity won. I answered, Daddy. Thank goodness you answered. I've been trying to reach you for days. Chloe's voice hit my ear like fingernails on a chalkboard. The panic was real this time. There were none of the calculated tears she'd used before. This was the raw, unfiltered desperation of someone whose safety net had just snapped. Her words tumbled over each other in a rush. I, however, felt a strange calm settle over me. I've been busy, Chloe, I said, my voice as level as lake water on a windless day. What do you need? The bank, she shrieked. The bank called this morning. They said the mortgage payment is a month overdue. They're talking about foreclosure proceedings. We could lose everything. Everything. The word tasted bitter even through the phone. Everything she'd built on my money. Everything she'd assumed would continue to flow from my account like water from a faucet she never bothered to maintain. When are you going to pay it? She demanded, her voice climbing toward that hysterical range that used to trigger my protective instincts. Now it just sounded like noise. I set my paintbrush down carefully on the edge of the can, taking my time. Through the kitchen window I could see George methodically trimming his hedges, a simple picture of a man maintaining what was his. What do you mean you're not? Her voice was a tight wire of disbelief. I mean exactly that, Chloe, I said, the words clear and solid. I'm not paying it. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever again. But, Daddy, you always help me. You promised you'd always be there. The manipulation was so naked now, so obvious, that I wondered how I'd ever fallen for it. The same emotional blackmail. The same appeals to promises I'd never actually made. I helped the daughter I thought I had, I said calmly. That person, it seems, doesn't exist. The sobbing started then, the full theatrical production. Please, we'll lose the house, our credit, our future. I let her cry for a moment. Then I spoke over it, my voice firm but not unkind. Then I guess you and your husband will have to figure it out. I hung up the phone while she was still mid-sob, and stood for a moment in my newly painted kitchen, the silence broken only by the radio. I stood in my kitchen for a long moment, listening to the echo of my own words. The radio was still playing some song about standing your ground when the world tries to push you around. I picked up my paintbrush, a small smile touching my lips, and hummed along, applying another perfect, even coat to the cabinet that would never again bear the fingerprints of manipulation. The simple act of creation, of improving my own space, felt more satisfying than anything I had done in years. My bank statement lay on the counter where I'd left it that morning, open to reveal numbers that still surprised me. 2 months ago, that balance would have already been $1,200 lighter. The difference represented more than money. It represented choice, freedom, the revolutionary concept of keeping what I had earned. For lunch, I made myself a sandwich. For the past year, I'd been buying the cheapest store-brand cold cuts to accommodate Chloe's financial drain. But today, I used thick-cut deli turkey from the local butcher. The taste of real food, purchased without guilt or calculation, was a small but profound reminder of what normal people took for granted. My pension had always been enough to cover my needs. It was Chloe's needs that had been the expensive part. The afternoon stretched ahead, an open invitation to possibilities I had forgotten existed. I pulled out the spiral notebook, the one where I used to track Chloe's payment schedules and broken promises. I flipped to a clean page and retitled it, Walter's List. The entries now were different. New refrigerator, approx. $900. Deck repairs, approx. $400. Weekend fishing trip to Lake Erie with Sam, $300. These were numbers that added up to a life, my life. On impulse, I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Thompson's Appliances downtown. Thompson's, this is Maria speaking. Hello, Maria. This is Walter Collins. I'd like to schedule a delivery for a refrigerator this Friday. Oh, certainly, Mr. Collins. What model were you interested in? I looked at my old refrigerator, humming along on borrowed time. Its freezer caked with ice that had to be defrosted manually every month. The best one you have, I said, the words feeling good in my mouth. The best one that costs under $1,000. Not the cheapest, not the one on sale, the best one. Because I deserved appliances that worked properly, and for the first time in a long time, I could finally afford them. By 5 o'clock, I had a new refrigerator scheduled for delivery, a fishing trip planned for the following weekend, and a contractor coming to give an estimate on the deck. My calendar, once held hostage by Chloe's endless crises, now belonged entirely to me. The freedom was almost disorienting, but in the best possible way. I was grilling a steak on the back porch as the sun painted the Ohio sky in shades of orange and purple. The sizzle of real beef on hot metal sounded like prosperity. It smelled like a man taking care of himself the way he deserved. This simple act, cooking a meal for one, felt like a luxury beyond description. Harry, my neighbor, appeared at the low wooden fence that separated our yards, a bottle of beer in his hand and a curious expression on his face. "You're looking mighty content over there, Walter," he called out. "Good day for it," I replied, flipping the steak with a practiced ease. "Beautiful evening, good food, no complaints." Haven't seen Chloe's car around lately," he noted casually. "Wedding preparations keeping her busy?" I had never told Harry the whole truth about Chloe's marriage, partly from embarrassment, but mostly because it hadn't seemed important. Now, it felt like ancient history. "Chloe's handling her own affairs these days," I said, my voice even. "I'm focusing on mine." Harry nodded, a look of approval in his eyes. "Probably healthy. Can't live your kids' lives for them forever." As twilight deepened into evening, I heard a car door slam somewhere down the street. For just a second, a jolt of muscle memory made me wonder if Chloe was coming to continue our conversation in person. Then, I realized something profound. I didn't care. Let her come. This was my house, my porch, my life. I was ready. The car door I'd heard, it turned out, belonged to her after all. At 6:30, she appeared around the corner of my house with Kevin trailing behind her like an uncomfortable shadow. They approached my back porch, where I sat finishing my coffee, moving with the hesitant, shuffling steps of people who knew they were not welcome. Chloe looked terrible. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd probably slept in. Kevin kept his distance, his gaze fixed on the ground, clearly mortified by whatever desperate plan had brought them here. The golden hour light cast harsh shadows across their faces, emphasizing the strain of people facing consequences they had never expected. I didn't stand up. I didn't invite them to sit. I just watched them cross my yard with the detached interest of a man observing strangers navigating his property. I took a slow sip of my coffee as they came to a stop at the bottom of my porch steps. "I figured you'd show up eventually," I said. My calm observation seemed to unnerve them more than any outburst could have. Chloe took a hesitant step forward, clasping her hands in front of her like she was praying to a deity she'd never believed in before this moment. "Daddy, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "This is serious. We're going to lose the house." Everything's always serious with you, Chloe," I replied, taking another sip of my coffee. The liquid was lukewarm now, but I barely noticed. That's how I've learned it. Usually isn't. The dismissal of her urgency clearly threw her. Kevin, seeing his wife falter, decided it was his turn to try. He stepped forward, attempting a tone of respectful reason. "Mr. Collins, we really appreciate everything you've done for us, and we understand if you're upset." I finally turned my gaze on him, this man who had married my daughter in secret while living in a house I was paying for. "Do you, Kevin?" I cut him off, my voice quiet but sharp. "Because that celebration you had without me suggested a complete and utter lack of appreciation." Kevin flinched as if struck and fell silent. Seeing her husband's failure, Chloe escalated the theatrics. With a gut-wrenching sob, she dropped to her knees in the damp evening grass, a gesture so over the top it would have been laughable if it weren't so pathetic. "Please, Daddy," she wailed, looking up at me with wide, pleading eyes. "I'm begging you, we can't survive without your help." Doug looked mortified, but after a moment's hesitation, he dutifully knelt beside her, a reluctant partner in this final desperate performance. From my elevated position on the porch, I looked down at them literally and figuratively. Two grown adults, kneeling in my yard, begging for a handout from the man they had deliberately and methodically cut out of their lives. The irony was staggering. I set my coffee mug down on the small table beside my chair. The steak was probably getting cold, but I was no longer hungry. "You created a family without me," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the anger or pain that had once consumed me. It was simply a statement of fact. Now you need to learn to survive as that family. My words, cold and final, seemed to hang in the evening air. For a moment, Chloe just knelt there, stunned, as if she couldn't comprehend a world where her pleas didn't work. Her voice, when it came, cracked with a raw pain that, once upon a time, would have moved mountains in my heart. "But you're my father," she whispered, as if reminding me of a role I'd forgotten. "You're supposed to help me." Fathers help daughters," I corrected her, my voice still quiet. "I don't know what you are to me anymore, Chloe, but you're not that." Seeing that the appeal to our bond had failed, she played her final card. With the utter desperation of someone who had absolutely nothing left to lose, she looked me straight in the eye, her face a mask of tragic grievance. "What would Mom think?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What would Eleanor think of you abandoning me like this?" The mention of her name, my Eleanor, whose memory was the purest thing I had left in this world, hit exactly the wrong nerve at exactly the wrong moment. It was a violation, a desecration, using the unconditional love of her mother as the final twist of the knife. Something inside me snapped. I stood up for the first time since they had arrived. The movement was slow, my old joints creaking in protest, but I rose to my full height, feeling a steel rod replace my spine. The soft, grieving widower was gone, replaced by a pillar of cold, righteous fury. The evening shadows seemed to fall away as I stepped to the edge of the porch, looking down at her. "Your mother?" I said, and my voice was different now. It was low, shaking with an anger I hadn't felt in years, an anger that came from a place so deep it frightened even me. "Your mother would be ashamed of what you became. She would be disgusted by how you used her memory as a tool. She would be horrified that you used love as a weapon, and our family as a bank account." My words fell into the deepening twilight, and Chloe finally fell silent. The theatrics were gone, the manipulative tears replaced by the real, ragged weeping of someone who finally understood that they had lost something irretrievable. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. Kevin just stared at the ground, a statue of shame, probably calculating in his head how many months of his own salary I had unknowingly contributed to their lifestyle. The golden light had faded from the sky, leaving them in shadows that seemed fitting for people who had chosen to live in the dark corners of deceit. The anger drained out of me, leaving behind an empty, echoing calm. I was no longer speaking to my daughter. I was simply closing a ledger. $14,400 for your mortgage, I said, my voice quiet again, but carrying across the yard like a final judgment. 50,000 for your fake wedding emergency. I let the numbers hang in the air, each one a testament to my love and her betrayal. $64,400, I stated, the grand total sounding obscene in the quiet evening. That's what you took from a man who loved you enough to give you everything he had. I paused, then delivered the final, most damning charge, my voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow louder than any shout. And not once did you think to include me in the life I was financing. The evening cicadas started their chorus then, their shrill song filling the vast, unbridgeable chasm that had opened between us. Chloe remained on her knees, crying without making a sound. My steak was cold. My coffee was cold. My heart, I thought, was finally at peace. I looked at the two strangers in my yard, and felt nothing. No anger, no love, no pain, just a quiet finality. Get off my property, I said, the words flat and empty. Both of you. They rose without protest. Two people who had finally run out of arguments, manipulations, and appeals to emotions they had never truly understood. As they turned to walk away, I settled back into my chair and picked up my cold mug of coffee, a clear, silent signal that for me, this conversation was already over. Chloe looked back once as she reached the corner of the house, her face illuminated for a moment in the light spilling from my kitchen window. It was a face filled with a loss so profound it was almost unrecognizable. Then she was gone. I heard two-car doors slam shut in the driveway, the sound muffled and distant. Headlights swept across my lawn as they backed out onto the street. The sound of their engine faded into the chorus of the evening cicadas, leaving behind a silence that was deeper and more complete than any I had known before. It wasn't the silence of loneliness that had haunted me since Eleanor passed. This was different. This was the silence of peace, the silence of a home that was finally, completely, my own again. The air was no longer thick with unspoken questions or the tension of waiting for a phone call that would never come. It was just quiet. I looked down at the steak on my plate, now cold and unappetizing, a symbol of a perfect evening that had been interrupted. Without a second thought, I picked up the plate, walked inside, and scraped the entire meal into the trash. It was a small act, but it felt significant, a final discarding of a moment they had tainted. I washed my hands and made myself a fresh cup of chamomile tea. Back in my worn leather armchair, the one that had held me through so many years of worry, I took a slow sip. The house felt bigger, lighter. The ghosts of manipulation and obligation had been exorcised. There was no more drama to anticipate, no more financial fires to put out. There was only the steady, comforting tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall. For the first time in over a year, I thought about tomorrow, not with a sense of dread, but with a quiet, simple anticipation. I would finish painting the kitchen cabinets. Then, maybe I would start on the bedroom. I'd call Sam and confirm our plans for the fishing trip to Lake Erie. The list of possibilities, all of them for me and by me, felt endless. I sat there for a long time as the twilight deepened into night, just enjoying the profound silence of a man who had finally learned the difference between being a father and being a fool. My life, from this moment on, was my own. A few days later, the new refrigerator was delivered. It hummed quietly in the corner of my freshly painted kitchen, a gleaming white symbol of my new beginning. The house felt different, lighter. My calendar, once a source of anxiety, now held dates I actually looked forward to. Our fishing trip to Lake Erie was booked for the end of the month. That afternoon, I found myself drawn to my workshop in the garage, a space I hadn't truly entered in over 3 years. Dust motes danced in the single beam of sunlight slanting through the grimy window. My old tools hung on the pegboard, coated in a fine layer of neglect, waiting patiently. My eyes landed on a shape covered by a dusty canvas sheet on my main workbench. I knew what it was. I had avoided looking at it, avoided even thinking about it, since the day I lost Eleanor. Slowly, I reached out and pulled the sheet away. There it was, the cherrywood jewelry box I had been making for her. The pieces were cut, the sides partially assembled. I had started it with such love, planning to give it to her on our 40th anniversary. After she passed, the unfinished box became a monument to a future that would never happen, too painful to look at, impossible to throw away. I ran my hand over the dusty, unfinished wood. I felt a familiar pang in my chest, but it was different now. The sharp, suffocating grief had softened into a gentle, bittersweet ache. It was the sweet memory of her smile, not the pain of her absence. I remembered Sam's words at the workshop. "You gotta build something for yourself now, for the man you are today." He was right. Finishing this box was no longer about the ending of my life with Eleanor. It was about honoring the love we shared, and about the beginning of my own life, a life where I could still create something beautiful. It wasn't a painful duty anymore. It was something I wanted to do. For her, yes, but for me too. I picked up my old smoothing plane, its wooden handle fitting into my palm like a long-lost friend. I took a deep breath, the scent of aged cherry wood and sawdust filling my lungs. Then I placed the plane on the edge of the wood and pushed forward. A perfect, paper-thin ribbon of wood curled up from the blade, and the rich, sweet scent of a new beginning filled the quiet workshop. The next few weeks were filled with the pleasant scent of sawdust and the quiet satisfaction of progress. The cherry wood jewelry box took shape under my steady hands. Each perfectly cut dovetail joint, each layer of smooth, hand-rubbed oil finish felt like a small victory, a piece of my own fractured life being carefully put back together. It was no longer a monument to grief, but a testament to love, patience, and the healing power of creation. When it was finished, I didn't feel sadness. I felt a quiet, profound pride. I carried it inside and placed it on the dresser in my bedroom, right where Eleanor used to keep her perfume bottles. The rich, dark wood seemed to glow in the morning light. It was a beautiful tribute to the love we had shared, and a promise to myself to live a life worthy of that memory. This morning, I sat on my newly repaired back porch, a sturdy mug of coffee warming my hands. The air was cool and crisp with the first hint of autumn. My new refrigerator hummed quietly from the kitchen. The fishing trip with Sam had been a success. We were already planning another. I thought about Chloe, not with the fire of anger or the ache of betrayal, but with a distant, quiet pity. I hoped for her sake that losing everything would finally teach her the value of things that can't be bought with lies or manipulation. Her life, her choices, her consequences, they were no longer my burden to carry. My responsibility was to the man sitting here, on this porch, with a future that was finally his own. The morning sun warmed my face. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the rich, uncomplicated taste. I had finally learned that a father's true job isn't to sign blank checks to fix his children's mistakes, but to teach them integrity by living a life of his own. In the end, I had learned the difference between being a loving father and being a fool, and in that knowledge I found peace. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of the story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.